Hello everybody, Swing Wing Sing coming at you today with a special double build of the Airfix 1/72nd scale Hawk Trainer Mark 1A. I have already done an unboxing of this splendid kit in a video before, and I will place a link to that unboxing in the description below should you wish to see that unboxing. But for now, here is a quick rundown of what's available inside the kit box. And without further ado, let's quickly start off with the double build. So the Hawk Trainer Mark 1A kit actually comes in two different toolings. One is an older tooling from the 1980s and another one is a fairly new tooling from 2013. So the kit that I am building today is the 2013 tooling, and I must say that I have literally fallen in love with this kit. I have built so many Hawks by now, especially this kit, and this time I really wanted to go ahead and test my build skills by building not one but two Hawk kits. One is going to be a Hawk Mk.53 of the Indonesian Air Force, and the other is going to be a Hawk Mk.60A of the Rhodesian or Zimbabwe Air Force. So as you can see that I have already begun the construction of the parts inside the cockpit. This is a very simple assembly, and you can see that the seats, the cockpit floor, the control column and the instrument panel are nearly ready at this moment. And now I am moving on to constructing the arm of the pilot. In fact, not constructing, the pilot actually comes in two different pieces. One is the overall body and the other is the right arm of the pilot. So here you can see all those four pilots, one in the front and one in the back, so four pilots there, but I am going to use only two of them. And so one of them is going to be painted in this orange overall, which is the standard overall worn by the pilots of the Jupiter aerobatic team of the Indonesian Air Force. Right then, the overall cockpit was painted in gray primer, and then the seat headrests were detailed with a black Sharpie or a black acrylic marker, as you can see here, and so were the tops of the control columns, and the seat cushions were detailed with a green acrylic marker. Now the question you might ask here is, why did I leave the front seat gray and paint the cushions on the rear seat green? That is because simply I am going to install a pilot in the front seat and leave the back seat vacant. So here's the construction of the fuselage, and most of the changes in the Hawk Mk.53 and the Mk.60A are all external changes. Not too many though, but here you can see that I am doing a dry test fit of the fuselage halves, and you can see how beautifully those align. I actually did not paint the interiors. I just simply used the Tamiya panel line accent color to accentuate those cockpit internals, and then used the decals. Now the decals are very nicely done. They are printed to a high quality and high standard, and so I began cutting into manageable sizes and then applied the decals on the instrument panel and also on the side walls of the cockpit. Now the instrument panel, if you notice, is kind of oversized. It is much higher and much longer than the decal, so the overall structure of the instrument panel has to be trimmed to the size of the decal in order to make the instrument panel fit appropriately inside the cockpit. Of course, here I've simply applied the decals with the standard decal application procedure, and then used a cotton Q-tip to remove the excess water from underneath the decals. And then I used my Winsor Newton mineral spirit to clean off the excess wash inside the cockpit internals, and that gave a very nice look to the overall cockpit here. Alright, and then it was time to fix the cockpit floor inside the cockpit walls of the fuselage, and there are brilliant locking pins there, and you can see that the cockpit fits very well and the overall alignment of the fuselage is absolutely fantastic. I then used my cyanoacrylate glue to glue the two fuselage halves together, and then I moved on to the attachment of the avionics bay cover, which is behind the rear pilot's cockpit. Now I noticed that in one of these two builds, the rear bulkhead of the rear cockpit was a little oversized and it wouldn't allow the avionics bay to fit, so I trimmed it down, and then the avionics bay fits absolutely fine. Moving on to the air intakes. These are basically two parts for each air intake, and they both have nice locator pins and they align very well with each other. And once those two were glued together, I then glued up the air intakes on the sides of the fuselage, and you can see that the fit is absolutely flawless. Moving on to the wings and the horizontal stabilizer. After some cleanup, I attached the top and the bottom portions of the wings together after doing a quick dry fit test, and then applied cyanoacrylate glue to fix the two parts. Now at this point I had decided to go with an in-flight configuration on both of these kits, so I closed the gear bay door covers. Now the wing basically doesn't align, and this is an issue I saw with almost every Hawk kit that I've built so far. So a little bit of sanding from the front and the back of the wing center portion helps to align that wing inside the fuselage nicely. The horizontal stabilizers were then glued into their respective slots. The front nose gear bay door was also closed and glued with cyanoacrylate glue. The air brake just slides in, and the ventral fins also fit in perfectly into their position. Now the instructions for the assembly of the actuators under the wing are a little vague, but the point to remember is that they are all of different sizes and they've got different alignment pins which will fix only in specific slots, and so you've got to be a little careful of that. After that, I installed the pilot in the front seat, and he goes in with his legs, unlike on many other builds where the legs literally have to be amputated. I then moved on to the weapons. Now the weapons were only required in the Rhodesian Air Force Hawk version, and here you can see me assembling the drop tank together. And I also assembled the sidewinders, whereas I really did not wish to use the sidewinders. I wanted to build a ground attack version of the Rhodesian Hawk, which was used in the second Congolese conflict. And so here you can see me attaching the hard points on the underside of the wings, and then followed it up with attachment of the centerline gun pod. And the standard configuration was Mark 82 bombs on the outer hard points, the drop tanks on the inner hard points, and a centerline gun pod, as you can see here in the pictures. Now I had this JDAM in my spares box, and I did a little bit of research to see how similar the JDAM would look to the Mark 82, and I found that there is hardly any difference except those extra rails on top of the JDAM, so I just sanded them off. The length of both the bombs is kind of similar. There is a slight difference of a few millimeters, but I wouldn't be too worried about that size difference, and I would simply pass off the JDAM as a Mark 82 by just sanding off those features on top of the JDAM. Because of course, in the end, only I am going to know which particular bomb this is. Alright, so then I progressed on to the next step, which was masking the canopy. It's a huge canopy and it's got very straight lines, and it's very easy to mask it, except for that center portion where you have the in-cockpit splitter, and the outer canopy frame kind of runs along the borderline of that splitter. So I just marked that area with a OHP marker and then cut along that line with a brand new blade on my X-Acto knife, and that way I was able to achieve that perfect canopy mask. Right then, time for painting, and I used isopropyl alcohol on a small piece of tissue paper and then gave the surface of the model a quick wipe with IPA. Now, I don't wash my models in warm soapy water. I've never done that. I used to do that earlier, but I just avoid that step now, and I've never faced any challenges. All I do is before I start off with the painting phase, I give it a nice wipe with isopropyl alcohol and then begin painting. Now here I am using Camlin gray color, and I began by painting the overall gray that is the base coat of the Indonesian hawks. Now here you can see that the airbrush is spraying the gray, but it's hardly visible because there is a gray primer underneath. On second thoughts, I should have used a black primer so that I could follow along the paint, but nonetheless. And because of a silly mistake here of not setting the camera frame correctly, you see that the bomb is automatically painting in Fevicryl yellow ochre, but that's actually not the case. There is an airbrush spraying the paint onto it. Now I had two choices here. One is your Camlin burnt umber and the other one is burnt sienna. And I wanted to test an experiment, so I used the burnt sienna here, and I am painting that as the base coat of the Rhodesian hawk. Now the burnt umber was much darker, and so I had decided to first try off the burnt sienna, and this seemed to be laying down pretty nicely over the gray primer. It produces a very nice tonality of the kind of, you can say, dark earth kind of paint scheme that the Rhodesian hawks had. So I was pretty happy with the way this particular paint has laid down. I then moved on to the Indonesian hawk, which was already painted in an overall light gray, and then I started painting the camouflage pattern of darker gray over the lighter gray. I have mixed just a little bit of black into Camlin gray, and that has produced this darker gray tone, which I am currently painting over the Indonesian hawk. Right then, time to paint the camouflage pattern on the Rhodesian hawk. So I used camel sap green and darkened the tone down with a little bit of black to produce this olive drab paint on the Rhodesian hawk. Now in both cases of these two hawks, the camo pattern was painted at a pressure of 20 psi from a distance of about an inch or two away from the model, and I painted it up really close to be able to achieve that level of detailing in the camo pattern. Right then, masking off and time to reap the fruits of labor and see how the demarcations have come about. And here you see in the drop tank, in the Mk.82 bomb, and also in the canopy. And I am pretty chuffed with how this entire paint scheme has turned out. Time for the decals now. So these decals of course are not included with the kit, so I had printed them on my own. I have an entire tutorial on how I print my decals, so if you would like to visit that tutorial, look for that link in the description below to see and follow the steps on how I print my own decals. And here you can see that I have now placed nearly all the decals on the Indonesian hawk. And once these were done, then I moved on to the Rhodesian hawk. Now my research reveals that the Rhodesian hawks were not painted with the standard roundels over the wings and under the wings. In fact, during the second Congolese conflict, the Rhodesian eagle was the only marking that prevailed on the top of the rudders of the Rhodesian hawks, and there was just a serial number of the hawk in black The roundels, of course, came much later, after 2003 when the conflict ended. Post that, there were some repainting of the Hawks, which is when they received the over and underwing roundels. So I left it in that particular configuration wherein these Hawks were used in the Congolese conflict. Final step was to mount the weapons on the rotation Hawk. So I mounted the drop tanks on the inner hard points and the Mark 82 bombs on the outer hard points. And as a last step remaining, the antenna on top behind the rear cockpit is not present on the rotation Hawk, so I simply snipped it off, and that was the end of both the builds. And here we are then, ladies and gentlemen, on the rotating disc of glory. Here we are with both the Indonesian and the rotation Hawks in their final glory and glam. Both the models have turned out really nice as per my expectations. As I said, I'm already in love with this kit. I have built so many of them earlier. I am further thinking of building a few more of these in my ever-growing collection of Hawks. And here I finally leave you with a close-up shot of, just for the accolades, a Saudi Hawk as well. So if you've stuck with me so far in the video, I'm sure you have liked it, and I do deserve a big thumbs up on this video. Subscribe, like, comment, share, whatever helps the channel. Please consider doing that. Till we meet again in the next video then, Swing Wing Sing signing off. Bye bye and take care.